All right, we're back live.
Back,
Episode 12, correct?
that sounds right. Back like we never left. All
Yeah,
we did
short
took a bit
break.
of a took a short break. Jordan, what were you doing in your break?
A lot of work. I've been really
Yeah,
busy, which is a good problem to have. Can't complain about that. How about you?
I've also been working. I've been moving around a little bit. We were talking about before we went live. I actually got kicked out of my apartment on August 6th. Just trying to get better light here. Kicked out of my apartment August 6th, and then don't get to move into a new house lease until September 1st. So I've kind of been freeloading for the past couple of weeks now, and that doesn't really make for optimal podcast recording time.
Mm.
But we find the time now, and I'm excited to be back. A nice staple in my week that I had been missing.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of going to be more of a open-ended discussion episode, which is good. Sometimes those are the best, just conversing rather than having everything scripted. So
Right, 100%. So Jordan, why don't you introduce the topic, since you were the one that came up with it this week, and I'm really excited to dive into it.
yeah, so this is something I've dealt with but thought about, especially after kind of transitioning into this career. And it's kind of the idea of just social media anxiety, and that revolves around the creation of content all the way down to the actual posting. And I think we're in a day and age now where people get too caught up in one, what other people think, but two, honestly, that I think people are just too hard on themselves when it comes to stuff they're putting out on the internet. So I kind of want to have a discussion on that, because I know I've dealt with it too. And, by the sounds of it, I think you probably have a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we can kind of discuss that and maybe how we, I guess, overcame that, or how we're still working to overcome that.
Right. A constant struggle. Yeah. I don't think that's one that's ever checked off and like overcome. But I completely agree. When you reached out about the topic, my first thought went to this idea of like constantly feeling like, and this might be like an overarching thing. This isn't strictly to do with social media, but it definitely manifests that way, is that I always feel like I have to be busy or doing something. And the way that manifests on social media is like, I feel like I have to be posting all the time. And that if, like this podcast, if we take 2 weeks off, I feel a little bad about it internally. And I know we were joking back and forth in those 2 weeks that we weren't recording that, the people are clamoring, the people wanted to, like, that's totally not the case. That was the joke, where it's like, people probably didn't care or notice that we were not recording a podcast. But there's still that feeling, right, that we feel like we have to, because we owe it to somebody, or maybe just ourselves, that we have to be doing that. And I think for social media, for me at least, that feeling is definitely true, where whether or not people would actually care that I would stop posting, I think there's different variations of care. Like on my personal pages, people wouldn't care. On pages that people are paying me to do, those people would care because they're paying me to help out work, obviously. But there's this like struggle I have to fight within myself, which is like, does it actually matter? What am what I doing matter? Or that's a word jumble, but the stuff that I'm doing, does that matter at all? And
Right.
I think that's where my mind first went to when you brought this topic.
And for me too, I think it's almost evolved, because at first it was, I made this giant leap in a career path.
Mm-hmm.
And it was everything that I've read, everything that I've researched, my new career was content. You need to be creating and putting stuff out there. And I was never doing that. That just wasn't what I did with my social media platforms.
Sure.
And then it was a inner struggle with me. It's like, do I start posting this stuff? Like the stupid question of like, what are other people going to think when I start posting, sweet photos that I've taken? And, are they going to think like, what is he still doing finance? Like just all these stupid mental, roadblocks that came up that just don't make zero sense. But now it's almost evolved into, if I'm not posting enough of my creative stuff, like you had mentioned, it's like I feel like I need to be posting almost every day, and I need to like perfect it almost every day. And so it's almost evolved for me to another extreme, which is it's still kind of that same anxiety, but it's kind of a new issue for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that first part that you brought up of like caring what people thought, generally speaking, about posting that kind of stuff. I think that's very real, and honestly, that might be the most relatable part of this whole conversation, because
Right.
I know a lot. Like a lot of people deal with that. I'm sure of it. And I think it's been helped recently. Like I think, funny enough, like I think TikTok has kind of maybe nixed that a little bit, because I think a lot of people for a while, had TikTok, didn't want to tell anybody about it, and then we all realized at the same time that like we all had TikTok for the same amount of time, and you just post stupid dances, and it's like it's totally meaningless and it's not serious at all. And I think TikTok sort of helped like bridge that gap for at least a lot of people like within my social circles, because so many of these platforms, I think I started taking myself so seriously on Instagram, like on my personal feed, which is a true personal feed. Like I don't talk about business or like any professional things. Like it's just a feed that my friends and my family follow, and it's just pictures of me doing stuff on the weekends. But even that, I think I still hold such like a high standard of like what post should be able to go out on that feed or what post shouldn't be able to go out on that feed, and like caring about how many likes I get and like all that stuff. Like it's just the post modern era of social media, where it's like we've gone all the way from social media being like just something that's fun and everybody does, to now it's like we're so focused on curating our own personal feeds to be like so perfect and look so good. And I think that's where a lot of that stress comes from. And then if you get on a platform where maybe you're just learning how to do content like you were, or like I am, it's a constant struggle of learning how to do content. Maybe it's content that your friends aren't used to seeing, or content that isn't relevant to your friends. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this guy's trying way too hard. And now all of a sudden it's like, it was cool to try hard, but now it's not cool to try too hard. And it's like this constant struggle that's how I've always like played within my own mind.
Right. And when it all comes down to it, it's like at the end of the day, quite honestly, people don't give a shit like what you're posting, unless it's, obviously like offensive or controversial. But
right, it's
that whole idea of, maybe the one or two people that do care. It's like, do they really matter to you? Does their opinion matter at all? And it's that inner struggle. But, even for me, I guess like, I have a company page that I run, Motive. That's like, I guess my company that I house my creative stuff, whatever you want to call it. And then I have my personal page. And for me, it's like, it's my portfolio almost. Like I need to be posting my creative stuff there, because, when people hear about me or want to look me up, that's going to be one of the first places they look, because that's just
for sure
today's like. So it's like you had mentioned, it's like your personal page is just, you have that stuff that you do you post it on weekends. Like this is what I did this weekend. And for me, it's almost like, do I need to be posting that stuff on my personal page? Because like, this is my portfolio almost. And so now it's like a completely different end of that spectrum, but that's the inner battle that I have. And I've gotten to the point where it's just like, I'm just going to post whatever the hell I want to, because at the end of the day, it's mine. I don't really care what people think about it. So
yeah, and I was like setting up like sort of like a proxy account. I think I have like a Twitter account that sort of acts as my digital portfolio, where I can post stuff about work that I've done in the creative space, the social space, different stuff like that. And the nice part about it being on Twitter is that it's like you can link to the specific items. So like I can quote tweet an actual post that I did or something like that. So I felt having those proxies and just having those like pieces of separation between who I am on social media has been really helpful for me. And I think it's also helpful for my friends and my family, because like the way I see my personal Instagram account, like I almost would feel bad if I inundated all the people that follow me with that sort of stuff. And obviously like the stuff that I would put on there is way different than the stuff you put on there. Like you put on like really cool to look at videos and pictures and stuff that everybody would enjoy seeing. I would be putting on like, oh, Instagram account hit 100,000 followers today, or like stuff that would not matter. But it's been helpful for me to segment those things. And then also just like in conversations, I know when I first started How They're Here, the podcast that I had the 2 years prior to this one, I had a podcast page, and I really did not promote that podcast to my personal page, although it probably would have helped, boost some of my numbers, because, probably my friends and family would be more readily able to listen to it or know about the podcast. It was really important for me to segment those two things. And then there would be these discussions that I'd have with my friends or whoever it may be, and they'd be like, well, I didn't know you had a podcast. And that's sort of like that another level of like embarrassing, like cringiness, like, yeah, like I do. Yeah, whatever. And they're like, well, like, what is it called? Like, can I listen to it? And I'm like, well, I guess you could listen to it, but like the only reason you find it, the only reason you'd find it interesting is because like, it's something that I do. It's not any subject matter that you're interested in. You know, you're studying political science or biology or like whatever, and it was a business podcast, right? So I'm like, I appreciate the gesture, but this is the whole reason why I didn't want to have these conversations or put this stuff out on my social platforms, like my personal ones, because it's like, you know, people feel pressured to listen to it because it's me or like support my work, which is great. And I'm glad I have that support in my life. But at the same time, that's just another part of my life. You know what I mean? Like when I go out with my friends, I don't necessarily want to be talking about business and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when I sit down on Thursdays like this, you know, it's a great time to do that sort of thing. So I think that segmentation part has been really interesting to me. It was actually something I talked to Miles Biggs, who is a mutual friend of both of ours, about that. And he's sort of an older generation than the both of us. And I think that was sort of a foreign concept to him, where it's like, yeah, when I'm with my friends on the weekends, like, you know, I have like social friends and I have like business friends and I have like school friends and like I have all these different circles that, you know, if I want to talk about certain things, I can sort of go to these different groups, but very rarely do those like intertwine really deeply. So
that's a great point. Cause I mean, that as you were just listing off those things in my head, I'm going like, okay, I have my friends who I never want to talk business with. I have my friends who I love talking business with. And then like, there's that whole different segmentation, but I think it's weird. It all comes back to like a certain niche. So it's like we have these meme pages or whatever you want to call them that we run. And those are, you know, I feel like they're easier obviously to grow because it's so niche down that you're obviously just going to get the followers that are interested in football or Star Wars, whatever it may be. But in like someone who has a personal page, like they're trying so hard to, you know, cater to every single one of their followers who have different interests. And going off that, I think it's different for each platform as well. Like you had said about TikTok, it's like people feel more comfortable to be kind of crazy or outgoing on that platform, but you don't necessarily see that on like LinkedIn. So I'm curious do you like feel that about your content? Because I know for sure that I do. Like I'm not going to post something super businessy, like about like maybe a specific project on TikTok or Instagram, but I'll dive into it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think it doesn't necessarily segment for like platform for me. I think it's like very much, I think I have my personal online image and I have my professional online image. And actually, I mean, maybe now that I talk about it a little bit more, like on LinkedIn, you know, I stick strictly to business, and on Instagram, like on my Tyler Webb Instagram account, I stick strictly to being personal. And, you know, Twitter and Facebook, like all those things are kind of the same, where they each are kind of one and the other. But I think most of them are just sort of my personal, except especially when it's under my own name. Obviously, we both have accounts that like we run that are just different niches, like we were talking about. But when it comes to like Tyler Webb is the face in the profile picture, it all stays pretty personal and pretty like just who I am on the weekend sort of a thing, except for LinkedIn. And I even think there, you know, some of my personality sort of perforates through some of the content, which is a whole nother discussion, obviously. But yeah, it's an interesting question, but I think it just comes back to what I was talking about earlier, where like, you know, I just try to keep my social friends as my social friends and my quote business friends as my business friends, and I sort of try to live life from there. So
yeah, I was going to segue into something and I just literally lost it.
Well, that's a real shame. I think like what a lot of this conversation circles around. Yeah, it hopefully will. I think what a lot of this conversation circles around is just like sort of the perception that like other people have of you. And I think a really good way that I found because obviously everybody cares about what people think about them. And it's like embarrassing when somebody says, oh, you have a podcast, and kind of like makes fun of you because you're another white college age kid with a podcast. Like, I think a lot of that stuff just comes down to not taking yourself too seriously, which I've kind of found. And if there's one takeaway that I could ever give to anybody, not that I'm the final authority on creating content online, but it's not taking yourself too seriously. Like, I'm fully aware that what we're doing here isn't the most revolutionary thing in the entire world, but it's something that I enjoy and something that I have fun doing. And I think framing it like that for yourself and other people is really, really important, because nobody can, hopefully, if somebody like knocks you for doing something that you enjoy, they're just kind of an asshole. But if you're truly honestly doing this, like how we're doing this, or how we do a lot of the things that we do, that people might see as dumb or weird or like, you know, juvenile or whatever, however they will categorize it. You just have to remind yourself and remind them that like it's something that you do because you enjoy it, and it's like you have fun doing it. I think a lot of times, like when I talk about especially like 5-star football. You know, I like to joke and say that I'm the king of, you know, middle school football players. Like it's the most meaningless thing in the entire world, but it's just something that I have fun doing, and it's like a hobby for me, right? It's not like anything where I'm going to tell you I'm redefining the wheel. And I think we get into some issues where we have like these gurus online telling you that they can make you millions and millions of dollars, and those are the people who take themselves a little too seriously. But as long as you never bridge into that gap of like, oh, I'm going to help you make millions of dollars and work from home and live your dream life. It's like, no, I do an Instagram account. It's fun for me. It's like a hobby. You know, the same way that somebody's into knitting, they're not going to become a professional knitter or sell their quilts for, you know, for millions of dollars. I just want to do this, and it's fun for me. So I think that's sort of another really important thing that I've found myself reminding myself of pretty continuously.
Believe it or not, that's kind of exactly what I was trying to segue into, and it just worked out perfectly. But what I was going to say, and I just remembered, was kind of the overthinking aspect. And I am, you know, the worst at this. Like I just start, it honestly, it will even be like as I'm writing a caption for a LinkedIn post or something, I just start overthinking like, what's so-and-so going to think about this? And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, like, why did I do this? Did it make me happy in some way? What was the benefit to me? And really, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
That is literally all that matters. If it's growing your portfolio, if it's just the joy of getting something out there so that you can sleep at night, because like we said, we feel like we sometimes just need to post something.
Right.
If it was the actual act of, you know, for me, I just actually like to create content sometimes. So if it's just the act of creating, like it made me happy. So who gives a crap what anyone else thinks? So for me, I guess one hump to just get past that anxiety aspect is just don't overthink stuff, because at the end of the day, you just got to ask yourself how it matters to you and how it's going to make you better.
Yeah, dude, it's such the same way of like somebody that's into baking, or like I used the example of like knitting earlier, or like all these hobbies that are just traditionally like hobbies and nobody ever bats an eye at, or like golf, or like all these different things. Like these are all things that are pretty linear to content creation. It's like, you know, nobody's sitting here saying that they're the best at it, and nobody thinks so highly of themselves because they do it. Just because you go out and golf and tell people about it on the weekend doesn't mean you think you're a professional golfer. Or just because you bake and you share your cookies with people doesn't mean you think you're the best baker. Just because I, you know, make videos and enjoy doing that, or have an Instagram account and enjoy running that, doesn't mean I think I'm X, Y, or Z. It's just something that I enjoy doing. And I think, like I talked about earlier, that's just how I frame it. And that's how I would, you know, if anybody listening like struggles to rationalize what they're doing to other people, because I think that's where a lot of people fall, to be honest. I think there's like this weird rationalization that people think needs to happen for doing anything that they enjoy. It's like, you don't need to rationalize it, first of all, I suppose. But second of all, if you need to rationalize it in any way, just be like, look, this is something I enjoy doing. I find passion in it. It excites me, you know, just like it excites somebody to bake or calms them, or like whatever release you get from it. That's all that matters. And you know what, if you want to like go all in on it, then do that too. It's just like, I don't know. I think it comes back to taking yourself too seriously or overthinking it. Like you just said, like at the end of the day, if you have something that you want to get out of it and you're getting that thing out of it, that I think that's fine. And if somebody bats an eye at that, then maybe they're just kind of a jerk.
And that honestly brings up another great point of, you know, like the most prominent and popular faces on social media, they're, you know, good looking celebrities who are, you know, doing something outrageous or glamorous, whatever it may be, on social media. And that's what everyone's kind of comparing themselves to. So when they, you know, try to make a piece of content or post a picture, they're constantly referencing, you know, the star who's, you know, has 25 million followers, but it's like in all reality, that's just an outrageous expectation of, you know, for you to have for yourself. It's like, for me, if I'm looking at like a Peter McKinnon, like his Instagram feed, I'm just looking through, I'm like, okay, I need to start doing this. Like I have to travel to Norway every year and start taking these wild photos. It's like, no, you don't. Just go out and take some photos and videos of what you actually like to do and then post that, because it's you don't have to be anyone else. So it's that, and that's where I think social media gets a really bad rap, is because everyone starts comparing themselves to these, you know, wealthy, rich people who have a bunch of followers. But at the end of the day, like we keep going back to, it's all about what matters to you and what makes you happy.
For sure. I think I love the concept of like audience of one. And I think it you can use that saying in a lot of different ways. Like I've heard it in terms of when you're making content, like if you don't know what to make, or if you don't know what subject matter to cover, like make something that you wish you would have seen, or make something that you wish it was out there right now and that you would enjoy. But I think that's the same way for like fulfillment, basically. Like this doesn't have to change anybody else's life, or this doesn't have to make sense to anybody else, or it doesn't have to be exceedingly valuable for anybody else except for you. And if you, that audience of one, are getting what you want to get out of it, then it's valid and it's worth pursuing.
Well, we've been 20 minutes in, and this has been like a different episode in a good sense for me. It's just kind of, I think it's one of these topics that, probably burns in a lot of people's minds, and I don't know, a lot of people probably don't talk about it, but yeah, this has been good. Anything else, I mean, that you can think of here? We've segued into, kind of our experiences, thoughts we have, how to kind of overcome that stuff. And
yeah,
I don't think there's any exact formula for anyone by any means, but I do think it's one of those things, like everything else in the world. If it makes you happy, just do it. So
yeah, I completely agree. And I think that we talked a lot about sort of like the personal aspect of it, and not even so much like the pragmatic aspect of like, you and I just took 2 weeks off of doing this. And I think it's good to know, like, obviously we just talked about sort of the internal battles that we fight, but there's also a whole thing of like, sometimes things get in the way, or life gets in the way. And we talked about at the beginning that you just feel this pressure to like keep creating. It's like once you sort of pass that first hurdle of what we just talked about, of like, do you even want to start creating in the first place? Then it's the hurdle of like, how often do you create, and how do you keep momentum and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's like important to take a break. And it's also important to realize that we've talked about this before, and it's kind of a perforating theme that like nobody gives a shit. Like nobody gives a shit if you take yourself too seriously, or if you're goofy, or if your content sucks. Also, nobody cares if you take time off or anything like that. And I think it's important to recognize that you're beholden to yourself, and that's it. And so whether it be, worried about what other people think, or whether it be like stressed out or anxious about hitting a quota that's probably arbitrary and that you set in your mind, it's important to realize that like you're beholden to you. So do what you need to do in all of those regards to sort of make yourself happy and keep yourself fulfilled in whatever you're doing.
Boom. I like it. Super common theme throughout. Just like you said, do what makes you happy. But I don't know. We're going to try to get back on the horse here weekly, hopefully, at least getting something out there. But I don't know. This was a good topic, a little shorter than the other ones. We didn't hit our half-hour mark, but
not quite. No, it's really good. Go follow us on TikTok. Jordan and I have been making a concerted effort to post more on TikTok.
I actually missed last week or this week.
Unfortunately, it coincided with TikTok just probably being banned in the country. So, while you can, I think it'll probably be fine. But go follow us there. Some good content, like stuff that is from the podcast. So if you're a fan of the podcast, it's more consumable versions of that. And also stuff that's like, more of in line with sort of those like that challenge week that we did. So a lot of fun stuff. Go follow us there. Go follow us on LinkedIn. Excuse me, I just burped. That's fantastic for the audio listeners.
Good. I didn't even hear it, so if that helps, makes you feel better.
Well, now just people know that I burped, and I had to admit to that without them even hearing it. So go follow us on LinkedIn, our personal pages, and our Sweats Up page. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week, most likely. But no promises, but probably.
Yep. All right. Yep. Well said, Ty. Peace.
Thank you. See ya.